Hello, everyone. Welcome to Creating a Craving for Change, Driving Delicious Plant-Based Innovation for Institutional Dining Menus. Thank you to Oatly for sponsoring this session, and a big thank you to our panelists joining us today. Be sure to drop any questions you may have in the Q&A section or add a comment in the chat. Stick around until the very end as we will be asking the panelists for their one key lesson from this session. Without further ado, I would love to bring up our panelists and introduce Julie Cunin, our moderator for this session. Hello, Julie.
Hi there.
All right, thank you guys, and you can take it away.
Fantastic. Well, hi everybody, good afternoon. As Casey said, I'm Julie Cunin. I'm the Director of Sustainability for Oatly North America. So thrilled to be with you today. I will be moderating today's panel. And with me today, as you can see, our panelists. I'll just quickly introduce Joachim Buna, who's the Director of Product Development for Oatly North America. One of my colleagues, and I have to just say, a former member of the Swedish military culinary team, which won the World Championship at the 2010 Culinary World Cup. So he definitely knows what he's talking about. Also with us, my colleague Carol Landolfi, my neighbor here in Bozeman. She's Culinary Services Supply Chain Manager at Montana State University, a role in which she also serves as the primary sustainability advocate for culinary services. And Felipe Frangione, who is really one of my favorite new people in the world, the Latin America region executive chef for Compass Group at Google, where he oversees all of Google's culinary operations across Latin America. So delighted to have you all here. And I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes framing the panel, and I'm going to start by sharing some perspective on the state of the world's food system. So we know from the most recent analysis by the UN that emissions from the global food system account for something like 34% of total global greenhouse gas emissions. And about 15% of total greenhouse gas emissions comes from livestock alone. So to put that into context, the Washington Post a couple of years ago wrote, quote, "There are approximately 1.5 billion cows in the world, a population second only to humans among large mammals." That's, I think, a pretty shocking statistic. We also know that agriculture worldwide uses 70% of our planet's total available fresh water, and nearly a third of that use is just to raise livestock. We also know that about a third of total arable land on Earth is used to grow feed for that livestock, which destroys forests, biodiversity, wildlife habitat. So in sum, today's global food production threatens climate stability, threatens ecosystem health, and it constitutes the single largest driver of environmental degradation on the planet. But we have consensus among scientists and policymakers about what needs to be done. There's a recognition that global diet patterns need to converge around diets that are based more on plants. For example, we know from the Eat Lancet report that, quote, "a diet rich in plant-based foods and with fewer animal-sourced foods confers both improved health and environmental benefits." So in short, both planetary health and human health can converge around the benefits of a plant-forward diet. But to reach the necessary scale of plant-forward eating, this movement cannot restrict itself to fine dining or really to any one specific population of diners. What we need is more and more delicious plant-based options. These are going to be essential for attracting broad populations of eaters. We also think that ensuring a younger generation of diners that finds plant-forward eating to be a regular mainstream choice to be really key. And we think that food service culinarians who are expert in reshaping the concept of the plate around plants rather than animal proteins can lead in this movement. So today's panel is going to address creating a craving for change in the institutional dining context. And it's going to be looking at all three of these perspectives: plant-forward product innovation, university campus sourcing, and corporate menu development and culinary training. So with that as the background, I'm going to turn now to our panelists, and I'm going to start with Joachim on the product development side. So hi, Joachim, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm great. So as I mentioned in your introduction, you trained in food service for the Swedish military. Didn't think that was a sentence I would ever say. And I just want to start by asking you, how did that culinary training influence the way you think about product innovation?
Well, I think it's influenced me a lot. To start with, the whole reason why I decided to go from the culinary world into food science and technology was to get a deeper understanding of what happens with the food throughout the whole value chain that you mentioned, from farming and manufacturing through storage and preparation to how it digests and absorbs in the human body. And this circular way of looking at the food is the same mindset Oatly has, and something I've had with me from cooking in the Navy. Serving on a ship where space is limited and there's not much room for storage and even less room for waste. Those meals every 6 hours or so was the highlight of the day for the crew. I had to make the most of what was offered and make the food delicious and nutritious, so the team was happy and recharged to execute their duties. And also the approach when I was creating a dish as a chef, competing or serving, it's very similar to the approach I have as a food scientist when developing products. First of all, it needs to look and taste great, but it is important to combine other properties like texture, flavors, colors, and nutrients. And the basis of all of this, if it's a product or it's a meal, it's of course the raw material. If you have bad ingredients going in, it will be hard turning it into something good coming out. But what's been the most essential thing for me, I think, is probably the application part. Understanding how the products I develop now will be used not only in home kitchens, but by professionals in institutional dining. The first product I developed and launched when I joined Oatly back in 2012, I actually have my baby here with me.
Fantastic. Visual aids. Wonderful.
It was an oat-based creme fraiche. I always keep it now. It's my baby. And having that,
show us that baby again. Hold that up again. It's adorable. It's a very cute baby.
Yeah. It's not a format maybe for institutional dining, but having that culinary background came very well into play. So when I evaluated the product, I spent many hours in the lab and in the kitchen before it was ready. It took around 2 years from the project started before it came to market. So the background in both culinary training together with the food science education has enabled me to take that complete picture to the table when thinking about product innovation.
Yeah, fantastic. So that's a really fantastic foundation for the next question that I wanted to ask you, which was diving in a little bit more to product development. What are some of the unique technical or scientific challenges when you're developing a new plant-based product and you're thinking about its consumption specifically in an institutional dining market, like that scale of customer and size, for example?
Yeah, and developing food products involve three major things. You need to have the product, the formula, you need to manufacture it, having a process for it, and then you make sure that it works in the application. So for plant-based, and specifically, it's often includes inventing new technologies, creating new ways of producing the product, but it cannot really change the way people are using the product. So starting with the formula, developing a plant-based version often means deconstructing an existing item, like the creme fraiche, into components and rebuild it again with other materials. As everyone knows, dairy thickens up during fermentation. This does not happen with oats or oat base or oat milk because of the properties of the proteins, etc. So instead, in addition to the fermentation for flavor development, we need to build up the structure and texture using other methods and ingredients. And there's not much scientific research done on, for example, fermenting plants for plant-based dairy. So we basically must invent new technology every time. And once you've created that formula and you have your prototype, it needs to be scaled up to industrial production. And the problem there is that there's not much plant-based co-manufacturing facilities in the US or the world that have the equipment needed or can handle the requirements we have. So this means that the developer or food scientist needs to apply their invented technology to an existing process. And sometimes this requires compromising some attributes of the product and the format in the beginning, but over time, hopefully, more and more people adapt to it, and you can improve your process as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and the last part there, the application, I also just want to mention, before we can launch a new product, we need to make sure that it works in application, of course. For me, it's important that the user can apply the plant-based product to their everyday practices, so they don't have to invent, a completely new way of working just to adapt to it. It will never taste or behave exactly the same because it starts from different raw materials to start with. But it needs to taste great, right? And really work great in applications. So users don't feel like they have to compromise.
Right. Like it has to stand on its own feet as its own product, delicious, usable in all of those applications.
Exactly.
Aside from the comparison that you might be making to whatever it's an alternative to, is what you're saying, I think.
Right. And this was a big focus when developing the creme fraiche. All the way from appearance, the color, how it scoops, and how it works in applications.
Yeah.
And then also to pack size for like retail and institutional dining, because it needs to work for both. I worked with a school nearby in Sweden who helped me evaluate both the product, but also the whole supply chain in that aspect.
Yeah, interesting. So the final question that I wanted to ask you before turning to Kara to talk about really that application arena, right, where she's thinking about procurement. I'm thinking that you have to balance various different priorities, right? Nutritional value, taste, as you mentioned, marketability, culinary attributes, right? Like the application, as you called it, and of course, environmental sustainability. So how do you work to balance those when you're developing a new product and you're thinking about, again, this end customer of institutional dining venues? How do you go about the process of sort of balancing those different attributes or values?
Yeah, and that's a tricky one, right? Because they're also very closely related. The mission for me now in my role is to make sure we develop sustainable, nutritious, and delicious products to make it easy for people to switch to a plant-based diet. And it's really hard to rank them, but I would say that taste is definitely the highest priority. If it doesn't taste good and work well in application, right, it doesn't matter how great your marketing is. Great marketing, yeah, sorry, John, but no, a great marketing would probably sell in the beginning, but you won't have the repeat consumer. So. And then the other thing, like nutrition, is really, really, for our products, we start with oats and oat base, and that is the secret sauce in everything we do. And oats specifically, they have great macronutrients. It mimics what the body needs from an energy. So that's a really nice balance. But in some products, again, coming back to the creme fraiche, we need to add additional, for example, fat to get the characteristics. So every product we develop aren't perfectly balanced from a nutrition perspective, but it needs to fit into that balanced diet. Right. And we always strive to make a healthier option as well. And another benefit that we have there is we can choose the source of fat and the amount of fat. So we can not only upgrade the planet, but also make the consumer healthier at the same time.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer, and I really appreciate your emphasis on taste, because as someone who comes to food from the sustainability and conservation side of it, I've always sort of argued before my colleagues, like, it has to be delicious. If you want people to adopt sustainable choices, it still has to be pleasurable. And if you can lead with pleasure and lead with taste and lead with deliciousness, it's just a much easier case to make. So I really appreciate you highlighting maybe that first among equals, if we want to say. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Kara, I'm going to turn to you now. Since you obviously take the products that people like Joachim and obviously lots of other brands develop, and you have to think about how they're applied in the spaces that you are serving. So just to set the context for our audience, can you give us a brief sense just of the size, the scope, the range of culinary outlets for which you're responsible at Montana State University?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having us here and inviting us into your session. So Montana State University is located in Bozeman, Montana. So we are up closer to the Canadian border than the rest of the country. But here for our campus, we have typically around 16,000 students and two main dining halls where we have required meal plans, where they're unlimited meal plans. So we oversee all of those. Typically, there's, again, 4,000 students that are eating with us on a daily basis. And so on a typical day, we might be serving 10,000 plus meals across campus. And those are our residential meal plans or dining halls. We also have retail operations. And so that would be any grab and go foods, foods made to order, pizzas, sandwiches, also our coffee shops, where obviously all college students need to get caffeinated on a daily basis. So we oversee those as well. We have a catering department that does really large banquets, plated meals, any type of presidential meals that our president needs to have. And then any meetings, whether they're student groups or just meetings that are happening on campus. And maybe it's only coffee and donuts, but we oversee all that food as well. We also have a concessions. So any sporting events that happen, or we have a rodeo, powwow, high school sports, anything that's happening on campus, we'll serve food at those as well. And then to help supplement all of those different units, we have kind of a commissary kitchen where it's a bakery and salad department. And so they service food for all those different locations. And so in my position, I get to oversee all the different foods and ingredients and items that are used across campus. And so from that, we can make one minor change that may affect all of those different units. It's pretty fun here. So there's a lot of food to try on a daily basis.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, just hearing you describe it, the range, the diverse, first of all, the size, the diversity of formats in which you have to, supply really good food. It's quite striking. I imagine that comes with its challenges. So maybe I'll turn to that question and ask you, can you talk about a couple of the challenges that you encounter in sourcing options for, or products for PlantForward options across the diversity of venues you just described?
Sure. So there's always going to be challenges, but also with all the different operations that we do service, it presents a lot of different opportunities. And so with those challenges, a lot of that does come down to distribution and access. And so food service distribution and foods are different than retail foods and all those different distributors. And so even though you may go into a supermarket and see a product like, let's just say Oatly and their creme fraiche, that might not have made its way to a food service distributor. And so we do have this combination of working within our state procurement rules and regulations and having contracted vendors on board where we purchase foods from and what we purchase foods and like which foods we buy. And a lot of those will come from our mainline distributors. But in some circumstances, when we need something very specialized, we may find different avenues to be able to test different products before we go through kind of the hustle and bustle of getting it through one of our primary distributors. But access and distribution, especially being in Montana, where we're not around a very large population base, don't have the largest distribution centers close to us, that is one of our main problems and concerns. And then also looking at pricing on some of these more alternative foods that are just now coming to market that we may find at a food show and bring in to one of our distributors, that pricing is of a concern. And then quality too. The quality of the product is definitely, at the end of the day, that's kind of make or break. If it's not good and people aren't taking it, then that's kind of the final straw that breaks the back. So
yeah. I just want to say I'm monitoring the chat and I'm seeing a couple comments from your colleagues at different universities. There's one from University of Missouri, one from University of Saskatchewan, both saying like, we hear you, you're nailing the description of our challenges and appreciate you speaking to this. So you've got an eager audience. I wanted to ask a question from the students' perspective. So what kind of customer demand are you getting from students around plant-based eating? Like, what are they asking for?
Yeah, well, plant-based eating and plant-forward diets are definitely on trend, if you were, across the country. And so as we have a new audience of individuals that are coming and eating with us on an annual basis, our chefs are always excited to find those new food ingredients and test out new recipes so that we do maintain on trend and we're not getting stuck and like staying back in the 70s. Our operations, we're not a steamline buffet. You come into the dining halls and they're set up like these beautiful, majestic food courts where you have all these unlimited foods and you can pick and choose what you get off the buffets. And so with that, we consistently have students that come to us and vocalize their desires for different foods that we have here. And we do take that into consideration. And so we last year had a very, very vocal vegan group that came to us and really wanted to see different food items, whether they were alternative meat and dairy proteins, or if it was whole foods and we're looking at beans and grains and lentils and things like that. And so we have kind of a combination within our operations, but we do definitely seek out the student body to figure out what we need to do. And a lot of that comes through our dietitian that we have on staff here that does evaluate all of our recipes to be able to have all the information out for students. And with that, we create resources. And so we do have rack cards that we have throughout our operations. And so you can go in there and find different vegan and vegetarian options and choices and where they're actually located within the buildings. And then above every single dish that's displayed in our operations, we also have a line card that then would say what the actual food is. And then if it's vegan or vegetarian, gluten-free or local, has allergen information. And so we try and provide resources to make it easy for students to navigate all the things that we are trying to put out for students when they're dining with us.
Yeah, fantastic. And I have to say, you were kind enough to give me a tour of some of your dining venues since I live right down the street. And it is a beautiful space. I mean, it really was attractive. It was, I mean, I was not allowed because of COVID to go in and eat, but I would have if given the chance, because it was a very attractive format. So congratulations.
Absolutely. You're always, all of you guys are welcome back. Happy to give tours at any point.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you about one final thing, and this is something I'm particularly interested in, because I know from previous conversations that we've had that you were responsible for something called farm to campus sourcing. And I wanted to ask if you could share with the audience an example of a success that you found sourcing a local Montana product for your university. Of course, I know that not every Montana product is PlantForward, but since we're in the PlantForward dining, if you could maybe give us a plant-based example of farm to campus.
Absolutely, yeah. So here at MSU, we have a really strong farm to campus initiative where we go and try and source as many local ingredients from throughout the state of Montana as we can. So in Montana, we have a really strong heritage of farming, ranching, agricultural goods. And we are here as an agricultural school as well to try and help promote that. And when students come here, to give them a taste of Big Sky Country. And with that, it includes a lot of those row crops that we can grow, like lentils and barley and wheat. And so one really great thing in terms of this respect is lentils. Montana is a really, really strong, productive producer for lentils from throughout the country. And so we have a really great access to some different lentils from throughout the state that we turn into lentil burgers, different lentil curries, just plain lentils, spiced lentils. That's been a really wonderful thing where when we're able to combine stories of this is a local item and ingredient, but it's also helping with plant forward dining, multiple into one specific ingredient, that really helps us go and push forward with using those things. Another really great thing that we're able to do is across the board changes for something as simple as sugar. When the sugar is the thing that's holding a recipe back from being the difference between a vegetarian dish and a vegan dish, we've made the choice to bring in only beet sugar so that we have a vegan sugar source. And the other beautiful thing about that is that it is a Montana sourced ingredient as well. And so again, it's kind of layering on those benefits of broadening nutritional diversity within our operations and having plant forward dining options and also using local ingredients. And so when we can just kind of keep building those things, then those are when we can find those successes and be able to kind of explain those stories to all of our diners and consumers here too.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. First of all, I have a bag of Montana lentils in my cabinet. They are delicious. But you made the reference to building, beautiful. And it's really true. Like this is an example of stacked values, right? Because you're getting the nutritional value to your students, you're getting a teaching value to an agricultural college in the state, you're getting the economic and the farmer support value for your local farmers, and you're building a link in the local food system. It is a wonderful story, and thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Certainly.
Great. So I would love to talk further, and we will. in the Q&A section, but I just want to make sure that we have plenty of time for Felipe. So, hey, Felipe, I'm going to turn to you now. How's it going?
Hello. Thanks for having us. So pretty good here.
Yeah, great to have you. So again, just to set some context for our audience, obviously I know these are not normal times in terms of corporate campus operations, but can you just tell us briefly about Google's operations in Latin America in a non-COVID-y type situation? How many campuses do you have? How many employees? How many chefs are on your team? That type of thing, just to set the context.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm based in São Paulo, Brazil, but I oversee our operations in 5 countries. So we have Brazil, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico. So we have like 7 buildings with a dining program. So our team has over 150 associates, which more than half have a culinary role. We also have over 6 executive chefs leading our program in these different buildings and countries. Have thousands of providers taking into consideration the whole region. And then what differs LATAM from our operations in North America is that every country is totally different business with their particular suppliers, like currencies, ingredients, culture and foreign influence. So it is a big operation.
Yeah, that is an impressive operation. And you know, because you and I have chatted, I've spent a lot of my career working in Latin America. And I think from a North American perspective, sometimes people think like, oh, Latin America, it's kind of one. Well, obviously it's not. I mean, every country has its own cuisine, its own culinary traditions. There's so many diverse, ingredients. And that actually, I think, leads me to the next question that I really wanted to ask you, which is, what are some of the particular challenges that you encounter designing plant-based menus in countries that are really known for being meat dominant, in terms of their culinary cultures? Brazil, of course, where you live, but I'm thinking also Argentina. How do you address that particular challenge?
Right. So we found many challenges since we started shifting our menus. So what we know right now is that the shifting is a journey and it does not happen from one day to the next. So everybody must feel part of this journey and this change. So even associates or customers. So the first challenge was definitely to guarantee that the plant-based dishes were more craveable and appealing than the rest of the menu offerings. And it seems pretty easy, but it requires a lot of thoughtness and on how you are menu engineering. Also, we are constantly tackling on behavioral science because we know it's very important to understand your customers' behavior prior to start like menu engineering. So we can like take better decisions on how we'll be serving the food and in which layout or channel of delivery. So we also need to have like the knowledge of global cuisine flavors and precise culinary techniques to ensure deliciousness, because we are talking about large scale. We are not talking about retail. So this changes the whole game with a totally different bucket of skills required from chefs, like at this point.
Yeah, I'm really taken by it. I'm going to ask you to elaborate, I think, on the behavior change that you mentioned. I'm trying to think about, like, I'm trying to link together a little bit some of the conversations that the three of you are offering. So Joachim was talking about, the constraints of, for example, cooking in a Navy ship, where it's like you're very constrained in terms of space, and, people are laboring hard and they need to have, very specific, whatever, like rewards from their meals. And then, some of what Kara was talking about with the diverse context. So I'm trying to think about like a Google employee who I imagine works very hard, and it's maybe a high-paced or fast-paced kind of a climate, and they want something very specific out of their meal experience, or they're grabbing it, or whatever they are. So can you talk a little bit more about what your behavior change research showed you, or like led you to implement on the basis of that understanding of your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we were talking about like these customers and what are their needs on a daily basis. So we found that there is like a high demand on dishes that has like more nutrition. There are more nutrition. So we're talking about like pulse, we are talking about grains, and that's because they have like a high pace, as you commented before. So so our job was really to figure it out on how to keep all of these customers fully energized during the day. And I guess this is where behavior takes a bigger role because we know with conventional kitchen, we cannot we don't have like this outcome, I think. And with grains and with pulse, we can achieve more energized during the day, avoiding like peaks of energy and then lows of energy as well. So that was a big trend on how we would shift our menus and how we are menu engineering much better right now according to these behaviors and what the customer needs to keep themselves like very energized during the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you and Kara could have a little chat about pulses, right? You guys can compare lentil notes, I think. Thank you for elaborating on that. That's really fascinating. And I think it leads me to the next question that I wanted to ask you. To some extent, you've addressed it, but I wonder if you could give us some additional information. I was wondering what your employees were asking for in terms of plant-based eating options. So you've alluded to, sort of dense nutrients to energize them and kind of keep them going. Are there particular flavors or formats or specific ingredients or other types of things that you can share with the audience that you're finding your clientele is really asking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a very interesting question because each country has different demands. So first you need to understand like the local culture. So it's very different from Brazil to Chile. It's a total difference, there's total different flavor profile. So culinary influences that specific each region is also important to start understanding what's the customer demand. So as I mentioned before, like global cuisine plays a very important role in it comes the shifting menu. So for example, in São Paulo and Buenos Aires, we identified a high demand for Italian-inspired dishes. That's because I have like a lot of foreign Italians and then people just love their food. So how can we bring a lot of this Mediterranean diet and incorporate into our program? And that means like a lot of fresh vegetables, like olive oil, and then some pulse. How can we combine and make this the best experience for our users? And like enhance like the flavor with like fresh herbs, like enriching and customizing with tree nuts. So that's kind of the trends and what are the demands. And this will change for country to country. So it depends on the culture.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. I can really sort of see a picture of it in my mind about the differences that different people might be asking for depending on, their background, right? And the culinary traditions of the country that they're in. So I want to pivot now. We've been talking quite a bit about sort of the customer demand. And actually, if we have time, Kara, I'm giving you a heads up. I might actually come back to you with the same question that I'm about to ask Felipe. I want to pivot now and talk about from the chef's perspective or from the food service preparer's perspective. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the training that you do for Google's culinarians, the folks that are preparing the foods around plant-forward eating, and how those folks and your team has taken this on board and innovating and presenting that to clients. And if you have one or two sort of stories that particularly come to mind about that aspect from the perspective of the chef, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So nowadays, we are advancing with a partnership with the CIA on PlantForward Kitchen at Scale. So it's an amazing curriculum that is under development. And we understand that to successfully move forward with PlantForward cuisine, we need to make sure that people understand the fundamentals and have the right skills to cook precisely and with passion. So some success examples are mainly on the innovation field. So what has worked pretty well for us is to create excitement through new ingredients. So we are very focused on leveraging rediscovered crops into our program. So those crops really represent to me the joy of food because they generate great conversation between chefs and customers. So they usually have high nutrition value, and we are also leveraging local biodiversity and also allow chefs to discover new ways to cook based on heritage cuisine. So I think agrobiodiversity is one of the stories and on one of the programs that plays an important role in the plant-forward cuisine and has been working just fantastic for us from both sides. So I guess that's my key story. So leveraging agrobiodiversity for sure.
I don't know if this is putting you on the spot at all, but I mean, can you what's an example of some dishes that would be on the plate if they're telling that story of sort of local agrobiodiversity or reflecting that local heritage that your team is preparing and presenting?
Yes, absolutely. So we try to work with local ingredients. So for instance, we have like a lot of quinoa in our region. So how do we take those ancient recipes back and then present? And then we could be like in several different ways. We can have like in our salad stations, like, or we can just like have a crunch quinoa to customize something, or we can do like a fritter and enhance with this quinoa to add some nutrition value. So a lot of this stuff happening and going on daily on our operation, and then our chefs each more trying to understand how to use those products in a correct way, applying the right techniques to extract the maximize flavor and then nutrition. So that's how we've been working with those ingredients.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You know, it strikes me that, again, it's, you know, I'm seeing a lot of parallels in your story and what Kara has been sharing with this desire to really showcase some local ingredients that really tell a story of the place that you're in, that perhaps speak to diners' local, you know, palates, right? Their preferences based on their local sort of palate knowledge, if you want to call it that. And then it's also a way, I think, to give back, right, to the local producers in the food shed, so to speak. And so if you're able to make those links, it's just, I think that's a really beautiful story. And that's something I'm seeing, you know, kind of across this panel. So Kara, I'm gonna put you back on the spot again. I hope I'm not doing that too much, but I did want to ask you, actually, from the culinary and training side, is there anything special that you're having to do to train up the team that's preparing the foods at MSU so that they're able to produce these delicious plant-forward dishes? Could you speak to that?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have training weeks throughout the year. We also have special events and dinners that our different cooks and chefs get to submit recipes to try and showcase different things. And we have different tabling events where we'll have different students come and taste things and maybe vote on different recipes that they want to see showcased in the future. But a lot of, especially using alternative ingredients, oftentimes it does take more specialized training where you're not just throwing something on a grill, but you're having to incorporate spices and herbs and different seasonings and use and showcase different characteristics of the foods than just inherently things that just come with them, like a steak or something like that. So we do have a lot of training that is involved, and we'll also have different like guest chefs who will come here and showcase us different ingredients and stuff like that. And so, yeah, there's definitely training that happens throughout the year. But especially when our chefs get to put in their own input and submit recipes themselves, that is something that you find a lot of joy and pride in. So we try and get that from our different cooks as well.
Yeah. I don't know if, again, do you have one to mind? Like, can you give an example of a recipe that one of the chefs from the team might have said, like, hey, I'd like to try this, and you tested it out? Yeah,
we just recently had a chili cook-off, I guess, if you would. Where cooks from different buildings got to submit their recipes. And actually we did a tasting table where people got to vote on those different things. And so we'll just try and do those things throughout the year to try and create some excitement for students too, to taste something different as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. I love this story of sort of empowering the folks that are preparing to really be, you know, part of the team that's driving it forward, right? They have their own creativity. Obviously, they're all very talented people. So the fact that they're able to sort of put their talent on display in that way, I think that's wonderful for both of you. Thank you both for sharing that.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. Stay tuned as our presenters will share their brief takeaway after we provide some brief instructions for the upcoming networking time sponsored by the Mushroom Council. So be on the lookout for the snack inspiration recipe in the summit chat. Coming up in the sessions tab, we have 2 special culinary demonstrations plus 2 more meet the author conversations. Click on the networking tab for a 4-minute video chat. The icebreaker topic of today is, if you could go anywhere for dinner tonight, where would you? And then also head over to the Innovation Hub to see culinary demos, insightful presentations, and plant-forward innovation inspirations from our generous sponsors. Enjoy these networking activities, and we'll be live on the stage at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern for our next general session. Just want to thank you. This has been an amazing session. I will hand it back to Julie to ask our panelists the final question.
Great, thanks, Casey. Yeah, I think my answer to that question is anywhere but home is where I'd like to eat tonight. So we've just got a minute or two, so I'm going to ask you all to just be real pithy. But to close out, just wanted to ask you, see my timer going on. What's one lesson that you want to share with the audience from your experiences about the reach of plant-forward dining at scale? Lightning round. So Joachim, to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love hearing like Felipe and Kara talking about their experience. It's a mind switch for many consumers, and we can all together help speed up this change, like food industry and institutional dining, by creating like delicious food and make it easy, available, and affordable for people to drive that trial and make change happen.
Yeah, fantastic. Kara, you want to offer your thought? What's an important lesson?
Yeah, my outlook and lesson would just be strategic. And so figure out those key stakeholders that you need to actually work with and take small wins and make the small wins happen and count and take pride in those so that you can make them larger and greater, and really figure out who you need to work with and what are reasonable, achievable goals that you can make in small term, and then expand that to be able to try and make larger changes across your organization.
I love that. Build from something doable. Felipe, you get to have the final word. What would you offer as a parting word to our audience?
So I would say definitely leveraging global cuisine, and especially dishes that are naturally already plant forward. So eating is all about celebrating diversity through food. So isn't it amazing, the idea that you can expand that scale, leveraging globally known amazing dishes? I think for me, that's amazing.
Fantastic. Well, you've made me hungry now. So with that, I want to thank everybody. Thanks so much, panelists. Such a great conversation. I had so much fun. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you again. And our session sponsor, Oatly. See you all in 20 minutes for our next general session and cocktail shake along. And enjoy the networking until then.